The letter felt like lead in my hands. 15 reasons why our 10-year marriage should end. 15 meticulously typed bullet points explaining why I wasn't worth staying for anymore. I found it in her desk drawer while looking for our tax documents. Not hidden particularly well, almost as if she wanted me to find it. My first instinct was a punch to the gut, but within seconds, something else took over. A cold, calculated clarity I hadn't felt in years. I read each point again. Emotional unavailability, financial stagnation, lack of ambition, complaints that could easily apply to her as well. The irony wasn't lost on me. I placed the letter back exactly where I found it. No confrontation. Not yet. This wasn't a moment for emotional outbursts or desperate pleading. This required strategy. If she had taken the time to document reasons to leave, then clearly this had been brewing for months. And I had been too occupied with building our life to notice the foundation cracking. The next week was revealing. I watched her more carefully. The way she checked her phone with a slight smile. How she dressed with extra care on days she claimed to be just running errands. The nervous energy when her friends called. She was testing waters elsewhere while keeping me as the safe harbor. During dinner that Friday, she mentioned her friend's recent divorce. She seems so free now, my wife said, studying my reaction over her wine glass. Sometimes I wonder what that feels like. I simply nodded and asked if she wanted more wine. The confused look on her face was priceless. She expected hurt, questions, insecurity. Instead, I gave her nothing to feed off. No drama to justify her narrative. That night, while she slept, I reviewed our joint accounts. Transfers to a separate account had started 3 months ago. Small amounts. Nothing suspicious to the untrained eye. But I recognized the pattern of someone creating an escape fund. I made a crucial decision then. I wouldn't fight to convince her to stay. I wouldn't beg or emotionally manipulate her. That's what weak men do. Instead, I would show her exactly what losing me meant. Not through words, but calculated action. The next morning, I woke up early, hit the gym harder than usual, and started making calls. First to my lawyer, then to my financial advisor. I needed to protect myself while creating the perfect environment for her to reveal her true intentions. She noticed the change immediately. The distance, the independent decision-making, the absence of my usual checking in texts throughout the day. When she asked if something was wrong, I simply smiled and said, just focusing on some personal goals. By Monday, I had already secured copies of all our important documents. By Wednesday, I had a clear picture of our financial situation and what a separation would actually look like for both of us. Knowledge is power, and I was arming myself while she thought I remained oblivious. The question wasn't whether our marriage would survive. The question was whether she deserved the chance to stay after compiling that list. The ball was in my court now, and I was about to show her that discarding me would be the biggest mistake of her life. Not through begging, but by becoming the man she couldn't afford to lose. A man with options, boundaries, and unshakable self-respect. She had 15 reasons to leave. I only needed one reason to make her stay, and it had nothing to do with love, promises, or sentiment. It had everything to do with consequences. Soon, very soon, she would understand exactly what those were. The tactical shift in our relationship happened gradually. I started waking up earlier, often gone before she even stirred. My schedule became unpredictable. Some nights I'd be home for dinner. Others I'd text a simple, working late, with no further explanation. The confusion on her face grew with each passing day. 2 weeks after finding the list, I joined a high-end gym downtown and hired a personal trainer. The investment wasn't just physical, it was psychological warfare. I bought new clothes that fit my frame better. Got a haircut at an upscale barbershop. Small changes that accumulated into a striking transformation. When she commented on my appearance during dinner, I simply shrugged. Just needed some changes. The way she studied me afterward told me everything. She was recalculating, wondering if she'd misjudged my market value. I created distance in other ways too. Our usual weekend brunches became solo excursions for me. Meeting some colleagues to discuss a project, I'd say, offering no opportunity for her to join. The truth was simpler. I was building a life that didn't revolve around her approval. Through mutual friends, I discovered her recently divorced friend had been filling her head with freedom fantasies for months. Men are replaceable, and the dating pool is better than ever, were apparently regular topics of their coffee dates. This friend had turned bitter after her husband left her for someone younger, a detail conveniently omitted from their empowerment sessions. I invited colleagues over one evening, something I rarely did before. Successful, ambitious people who spoke of investments, opportunities, and growth. I noticed how she lingered nearby, listening intently as they discussed their respect for my recent work decisions. The narrative she had constructed about me was being challenged by outside perspectives. Her attempts to reconnect became more obvious. Wearing the dress I had complimented months ago, preparing my favorite meals without occasion, suggesting weekend getaways just like we used to. But I maintained emotional distance, responding with appreciation but never enthusiasm. On a Thursday evening, I received a call that I deliberately took in her presence. A former colleague offering a consulting opportunity, significantly more money for less time commitment. I accepted on the spot, watching her expression shift from casual interest to sudden recalibration. That night, she tried initiating intimacy for the first time in months. I kissed her forehead and claimed exhaustion. The shock on her face was unmistakable. The dynamic had flipped entirely. Now she was the one seeking validation I wasn't eager to provide. I discovered more about her plans through careful observation. A browser history showing apartment listings. Email receipts for career coaching sessions. She was planning her exit while keeping me in the dark. Amateur moves from someone who thought I wasn't paying attention. The following weekend, I noticed her watching me pack an overnight bag. "Where are you going?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but unable to hide the edge in her voice. "Meeting with potential investors. Might extend to Sunday." I didn't elaborate further. "You've been gone a lot lately," she said, following me around the bedroom. "Is everything okay with us?" I paused, looking at her directly. "That depends on what you want us to be." The color drained from her face. For a moment, I thought she might confess everything. The list, the secret account, the exit strategy discussions with her friend. Instead, she retreated with a forced smile. "Just missing you, that's all." I nodded and continued packing. The truth was, I wasn't meeting investors. I was consulting with divorce attorneys to understand my options. Knowledge before action. Always. By month's end, her 15 reasons to leave me would collide with the one reason I knew would make her desperate to stay. And unlike her carefully typed list, my reason couldn't be argued with, negotiated around, or dismissed. The countdown had begun. The third week marked the beginning of my financial recalibration. I transferred a significant portion of my personal savings to a new account, not hidden, but definitely separate. I wasn't playing her game of secret preparations. This was calculated transparency. I scheduled a meeting with our financial advisor, but went alone. When she asked why she wasn't included, I simply said, "Just reviewing my retirement options. Didn't think you'd be interested." The statement hung between us, heavy with implication. Her eyes narrowed, trying to decode if this was innocent or strategic. That same week, I declined a dinner with her friend, the newly divorced puppeteer who had been orchestrating this marionette show. "I'd rather focus on my work tonight," I said without apology or explanation. The look they exchanged confirmed everything. This friendship wasn't just support, it was recruitment. At work, I negotiated a position that would allow remote flexibility, location independence, a powerful card to hold in any separation scenario. My boss was surprised by my sudden assertiveness about compensation and terms. "Never seen you so direct," he commented. He didn't realize I was rebuilding my life from the foundation up. The subtle changes in my behavior created ripple effects I hadn't anticipated. She started calling during the day, something she rarely did before, checking where I was, who I was with. When I'd be home, I answered with brief, cordial responses that offered no emotional foothold. One evening, I caught her looking through my phone while I was showering. When I entered the bedroom, she quickly set it down, pretending to be reading. I didn't confront her. Instead, I dressed slowly, deliberately, and said, "Find what you were looking for," before walking out to make a call. The power of acknowledging her actions without showing anger left her visibly shaken. Her tactics shifted after that. She suggested couples therapy, a weekend retreat, even a second honeymoon. Classic preservation moves from someone realizing their safety net was being methodically removed. I responded to each suggestion with, "Let me think about it," never committing, never refusing outright. I focused intensely on building value in every aspect of my life. Old friends called, remarking how I seemed more engaged, more present. Colleagues noted my increased productivity and creative problem solving. I was becoming the best version of myself. Not for her, but because excellence is the ultimate revenge against someone who underestimated you. The list of 15 reasons remained in her desk drawer. Occasionally, I checked to see if it was still there. It always was, sometimes with coffee stains or wrinkled edges, signs she'd been reviewing it, perhaps questioning her own logic. By month's end, 3 things had fundamentally changed. First, my physical presence had transformed. The hours at the gym had sculpted a sharper, more defined physique that made heads turn at the office. Second, my financial standing had strengthened considerably with new investments and income streams. Third, and most importantly, my mental framework had shifted from husband to strategist. I arrived home late one evening to find her waiting in the kitchen. Dinner made, wine poured, wearing an outfit I'd bought her last Christmas. "I thought we could talk," she said, gesturing to the elaborate spread. "About us." I sat down, maintaining neutral expression. "What about us?" I asked, taking a sip of water instead of the wine she'd poured. "You've changed," she said, leaning forward. "You're distant, unavailable. I feel like you're slipping away." The irony was palpable. The very complaints listed in her reasons to leave were now her reasons to worry. I held her gaze steadily. "Interesting observation," I replied. "When exactly did my presence become important to you again?" She flinched as if I'd physically struck her. "What does that mean?" I considered my next move carefully. The timing wasn't quite right for the final confrontation. I needed one more piece to fall into place. "It means I've been focused on self-improvement lately. Sometimes that requires space for reflection." She reached for my hand across the table, a gesture that would have melted me months ago. Now, it registered as tactical rather than affectionate. I allowed the contact briefly before standing up. "I have an early meeting tomorrow. Thank you for dinner." That night, I heard her crying in the bathroom. The sound didn't move me the way it once would have. Her tears weren't for our relationship. They were for her disrupted exit strategy. The realization that she was losing control of the narrative. Tomorrow would be the day. The day I'd finally confront her with what I knew, and present her with the single, undeniable reason that would make everything on her list irrelevant. The ultimate power move in a game she didn't realize we were playing. The morning arrived with decisive clarity. After weeks of calculated moves, the time for the confrontation had come. I dressed meticulously in a tailored suit, power dressing for what would be the most important negotiation of my life. Not a word was exchanged over breakfast. The tension between us had become a physical presence. I left for work as usual, but returned home unexpectedly at noon. As anticipated, she was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. I stood silently in the doorway of our home office, watching her scramble to end the call when she noticed me. "You're home early," she said, composure cracking slightly. "Is everything okay? We need to talk." I replied, my voice measured and controlled. "Now." The color drained from her face as I walked to her desk, opened the drawer, and removed the list. 15 reasons to leave me. I placed it between us on the coffee table. "When were you planning to discuss this with me?" I asked, maintaining unwavering eye contact. Her mouth opened and closed several times before she managed. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to understand exactly what's happening here." I remained standing while she sat frozen. "Your friend gets divorced, and suddenly our decade-long marriage needs evaluation." Convenient timing. She attempted damage control immediately. "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think." I interrupted, my tone even but commanding. "You've been planning your exit for months. Secret bank account, apartment searches, career coaching, all while I was building our future." The shock on her face confirmed my intelligence gathering had been thorough. She hadn't expected me to know these details. "I was just exploring options," she stammered. "Sometimes I feel undervalued and—" "Let's address your list point by point," I continued, refusing to engage with her emotional manipulation. "Financial stagnation? I've secured a consulting position that doubles my current salary." "Emotional unavailability? Interesting complaint from someone who's been emotionally checked out for months." I methodically dismantled each accusation, watching her confidence crumble with every counter. Not with anger or defensiveness, but with factual rebuttals delivered with surgical precision. "Your list reflects your own dissatisfaction with yourself, not with me," I concluded. "You've projected your insecurities onto our marriage because it's easier than addressing your own shortcomings." She began crying. The universal defense mechanism when logic fails. "I don't know what happened to us. You used to be different. We used to be different. I sat down finally, maintaining the power position across from her. People evolve. The question is whether they grow together or apart. You chose apart without giving me the professional courtesy of a conversation. Her tears stopped abruptly. Professional courtesy? Is that how you see our marriage? That's how you treated it, I replied. Like a business arrangement you could terminate with a pros and cons list. The silence stretched between us. Finally, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. So what happens now? I removed an envelope from my jacket pocket and placed it next to her list. This happens now. She opened it with trembling hands, expecting divorce papers. Instead, she found photographs. Her divorced friend with my colleague's husband. Multiple dates over the past month. The betrayal that had broken up another marriage was now targeting another victim. Your friend isn't advocating for your freedom because she cares about your happiness, I said. She's recruiting divorce allies to normalize her own choices. She's destroyed one marriage. Now she's working on yours. Her face registered shock, then denial, then the dawning recognition of truth. How did you get these? That's your takeaway? Not that your primary influence has been systematically undermining our marriage. She stared at the photos, reality crashing through her carefully constructed narrative. This doesn't change the issues between us. No, I agreed. But it contextualizes them. You've been manipulated by someone with an agenda. The question is whether you can recognize that before making an irreversible decision. I stood up, buttoning my jacket with deliberate calm. I'm not going to fight to keep someone who has already decided to leave. But I will give you one reason to reconsider that makes everything on your list irrelevant. Her eyes met mine, a mixture of fear and curiosity. What reason? I know exactly what I bring to the table, and I'm prepared to walk away from it entirely if my value isn't recognized. Unlike you, I've prepared for either outcome. The life you're planning without me won't look anything like the one you've imagined. The quiet truth landed harder than any emotional outburst could have. I headed toward the door. Where are you going? She asked, panic edging into her voice. To a hotel. You have 48 hours to decide what you want. Not what your friend wants. Not what some fantasy future promises. What you want. I paused at the threshold. And if your decision is to leave, I'll respect that. But understand this. There will be no friendship afterward. No chance to return when reality disappoints. Clean break. Permanent. The door closed behind me with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than a slam ever could. The confrontation was complete. Now came the hardest part. Walking away and meaning it, regardless of her decision. The hotel suite offered a stark contrast to our home. Clean lines. Neutral colors. No history embedded in the furnishings. For 48 hours, I maintained radio silence. No calls. No texts. Complete disconnection. The psychological impact of absence speaks volumes that words never could. I focused entirely on business during this separation. Finalized the consulting contract. Began preliminary work on the new project. Established connections with potential clients for future expansion. My productivity soared without the emotional weight of a failing marriage consuming mental bandwidth. My phone lit up consistently throughout the first day. Messages ranging from confused to angry to pleading. I read each one without responding. This wasn't cruelty, it was necessity. Any communication would dilute the impact of my absence and give her emotional ammunition to avoid confronting reality. By the second day, an interesting shift occurred. Her messages changed tone completely. From, "How could you walk out like this?" to, "I've been thinking about what you said." From "This is so unfair" to, "I made some calls today." The evolution was precisely what I had anticipated. Anger to bargaining to reflection. That evening, my lawyer called confirming everything was prepared if needed. Division of assets. Financial terms. Clean, equitable, and efficient. I had mapped out two distinct futures, one with reconciliation under new terms, one with separation executed swiftly and decisively. Either way, I would emerge with dignity intact. As the 48-hour deadline approached, I checked out of the hotel and drove to a coffee shop several miles from our home. Neutral territory. The final moments of waiting were crucial. I refused to appear anxious about her decision. Whatever she chose, I had already accepted both outcomes as viable paths forward. My phone buzzed at exactly the 48-hour mark. A text asking to meet at our favorite restaurant, the place where I had proposed years ago. a transparent attempt at emotional manipulation through nostalgia. I declined, suggesting the coffee shop instead, setting the tone that sentimentality wouldn't factor into this discussion. She arrived 15 minutes early, another tactical move that I had anticipated. Her appearance was carefully crafted, hairstyled the way I had once complimented, wearing the perfume from our anniversary. I acknowledged these details silently while maintaining neutral expression. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, voice steady but hands betraying nervous energy around her cup. "These 2 days have been illuminating." I nodded but offered nothing, forcing her to fill the silence. "I made a horrible mistake," she continued. "The list was never meant for you to see. It was just me working through some thoughts with everything going on with my friend and—" "The list existed," I interrupted calmly. "Whether I was meant to see it or not is irrelevant. You created it. You meant those things at the time you wrote them. That's the reality we're addressing." Her composure cracked slightly. "I've ended my friendship with her. After confirming what you showed me was true. She's been filling my head with worst-case scenarios and independence fantasies for months." "Your choice of influences reflects your priorities," I replied. "But this isn't about her. It's about us. Have you made your decision?" She reached across the table, attempting physical connection. I kept my hands wrapped around my coffee cup, maintaining the barrier. "I want to save our marriage," she said, tears forming. I realize now what I almost threw away because I was listening to the wrong advice and focusing on minor issues instead of what we've built together. I studied her expression, looking for authenticity beyond the performance. "What specifically changed your mind?" The question caught her off guard. She expected immediate reconciliation, not continued evaluation. "When you left, it felt like the floor disappeared. Everything I had taken for granted suddenly seemed precious. The house felt empty in a way I've never experienced. And I realized that none of the things on that stupid list matter compared to losing you." I allowed a moment of silence before responding. "Those are feelings. Emotional reactions to consequences. I'm asking what specifically changed in your understanding of our relationship." She inhaled deeply, recognition dawning that this wasn't a simple makeup conversation. I understood that I'd been measuring our marriage against an impossible standard, that I'd been focused on what was missing instead of what was present. And most importantly, her voice steadied with genuine realization. "I understood that you're not someone who needs me to stay. You're someone who chooses to stay despite having options. That's the difference." There it was. The fundamental shift in perspective I had been engineering for weeks. Not desperation to keep her, demonstration that I would be fine either way. "What do you want moving forward?" I asked, maintaining neutrality. "A chance to rebuild. To be worthy of the commitment you've shown." She paused, then added with surprising insight. "And I understand it won't be on the same terms as before." I nodded, finally allowing the slightest softening in my expression. "I'll return home tonight. We can discuss those terms then." As I stood to leave, she grabbed my wrist gently. "Are you still committed to us? Or is this just closure?" I looked directly into her eyes, my first genuine emotional connection in weeks. I meant my vows when I made them. But continuing our marriage requires a completely new understanding between us. One where my value is never again listed as insufficient. The relief in her eyes was palpable, but tempered with the awareness that the dynamic had permanently shifted. The balance of power had been recalibrated, and as I walked to my car, I felt neither victory nor vindication, only clarity about the path forward and the boundaries that would never again be crossed in our relationship. That evening, I returned home with calculated precision, not rushing back, not delaying unnecessarily. The house had been meticulously cleaned, evidence of nervous energy channeled into productivity, a visible effort to create order from chaos. She had prepared dinner, but unlike her previous attempt at manipulation through nostalgia, this meal was simple and straightforward. No wine, no candles, no transparent attempts at seduction, just sustenance for a necessary conversation. We ate in relative silence, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between us. When the plates were cleared, I took the lead. "Let's establish the new foundation," I said, my voice even and authoritative. "If we're moving forward, these terms are non-negotiable." She nodded, tension evident in her posture but determination clear in her eyes. "Complete transparency," I began. "Financial accounts remain separate, but with full disclosure of transactions. No hidden movements of funds. No secret preparations for exit strategies. She agreed without hesitation. Relationship boundaries, I continued. Any friendship that actively undermines our marriage is immediately terminated. Any evidence of external influence that promotes separation rather than resolution results in immediate reconsideration of my commitment. She swallowed hard but nodded again. Communication protocols, I added. Issues are addressed directly when they arise. No lists. No stockpiling of grievances. No passive-aggressive hints. Direct conversation or the issue doesn't exist. Agreed, she said softly. I've learned that lesson painfully. I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact. Most importantly, respect. Not as a concept, but as a daily practice. My value to this relationship is not measured by your temporary dissatisfaction or external comparisons. It is demonstrated through consistent action over years. Tears formed in her eyes, but unlike before, these weren't tactical. They were recognition of hard truth. I understand, she said, and I want to add something to your terms. I raised an eyebrow, permitting her to continue. Accountability, she offered. I need to earn back the trust I've damaged. I don't expect immediate forgiveness or for things to return to normal overnight. I'm prepared to demonstrate my commitment consistently until it's clear again. The addition surprised me, a sign of genuine reflection rather than performative reconciliation. I nodded approval. There's one more thing, I said, reaching into my pocket. I placed a small box on the table between us. Her eyes widened, confusion evident. What's this? Open it. Inside was a key. Simple, unremarkable, except for what it represented. This is the key to a safe deposit box containing everything I've prepared for either outcome of your decision. Financial documents, legal preparations, evidence gathered, everything needed for separation if that was your choice. Her hand trembled slightly as she touched it. I'm giving it to you because I won't live with contingency plans anymore. Either we're fully committed to rebuilding, or we separate cleanly. No middle ground. No secret preparations. All in or all out. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was effective. The transfer of control over the very tools I had created to protect myself from her potential betrayal. She closed her hand around the key, understanding the significance. Thank you for the chance to prove myself worthy of this trust. Don't thank me yet, I replied calmly. The hardest part begins now. Rebuilding takes longer than destroying ever did. Over the following weeks, the transformation in our dynamic was evident to anyone who observed closely. Her previously dismissive attitude toward my career achievements turned to genuine interest and support. My emotional availability increased proportionally to her demonstrated commitment. The pivotal moment came a month later when her divorced friend attempted to reconnect. Instead of hiding the interaction, she showed me the messages immediately and drafted a response declining further contact. No defensive justification. No split loyalty. Clear prioritization of our marriage over toxic influence. That night, as we prepared for bed, she asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. What was it? The one reason you knew would make me stay when I had 15 reasons to leave. I considered her for a moment before answering. It wasn't about making you stay. It was about making you understand what leaving truly meant. I paused, letting the distinction sink in. You weren't leaving a desperate man who would beg for another chance. You were leaving a man who would thrive without you, who had options, value, and a clear vision for his future with or without you in it. Recognition dawned in her expression. The one reason that made all 15 irrelevant was simple. I became the man you couldn't afford to lose, not through manipulation or emotional blackmail, but by embodying my full potential and refusing to accept less than I deserve. She nodded slowly, the truth of it settling between us. That's why none of my reasons mattered in the end, she admitted. They were complaints about things I thought were missing. But when faced with losing everything we built, I realized those complaints were insignificant compared to what was at stake. Exactly. And moving forward, that understanding remains our foundation. I choose to be here every day, not because I need to be, but because I want to be. The moment that choice isn't respected is the moment I make a different one. 6 months later, our marriage bears little resemblance to what it was before the list. Stronger communication, clearer boundaries, mutual respect that comes from genuine appreciation rather than fear of loss. The 15 reasons have never been mentioned again, burned in a symbolic ceremony of letting go. The one reason, however, remains our guiding principle, not as a threat, but as a reminder of what nearly slipped away when value wasn't recognized. A lesson learned not through desperate pleading, but through confident action and unwavering self-respect. Sometimes the strongest reason to stay isn't found in elaborate lists of pros and cons, but in the undeniable presence of something irreplaceable, something only truly valued when its loss becomes imminent.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.